Hi, I'm Nakia Behill, the Director of Brand and Experience here at Vendasta. We're going to dive into the fundamentals of storytelling and their brand counterparts. Because the best story wins. Not necessarily the best product or the best solution, but the best story. And that's why it's so important for us to tell our stories, our brand stories, and to create a culture of storytelling within our organizations. If you need convincing, here are a few stats. Stories are 22 times more memorable than facts and figures alone. Our neural activity actually increases 5 times when listening to a story. And storytelling lights up the sensory cortex in the brain, allowing the listener to feel, hear, taste, and even smell the story. We want to connect with customers in an emotional way. We want them to feel our story. We want them to become our story. Brand stories are the most powerful tool we have available. So we're going to talk about the fundamentals of storytelling and how each of those elements relates to brand stories. The 6 fundamentals of story are setting, characters, plot, conflict, theme, and story arc. First up, setting. The setting is the time and location in which your story takes place. Settings can be really specific, but they can also be more broad and descriptive. Specific like Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, 1991 to 1998, or more vague, like a tired cabin in the woods, a nondescript time. The setting is a key element to the story, and for some stories, the setting can even become a character. The parallel for setting for brand stories is market and brand positioning. You need to understand the market where your story takes place. Like setting, the market can be broad or highly specific. Broad, restaurant chains and beauty salons, or specific, restaurant owners in Atlanta with more than 10 years of experience generating over $1 million of revenue. A brand positioning statement is an internal guideline used to align your company when making business and marketing decisions. It should answer these 4 questions. First, who are your customers? Then, what does your product or service do, or what problem does it solve? And then, what can you provide them, your audience, that the competition cannot? And lastly, why should they believe you, and why should they believe in you? Next story fundamental, characters. Characters are vital to the development of the story. The plot revolves around them. Central characters almost always include at least a protagonist and an antagonist, and sometimes a narrator. What you remember about a story almost always has to do with characters. You can't have The Office without Michael Scott or The Last Dance without Michael Jordan. Think of your favorite movies or shows and consider what comes to mind. It's often characters. We come to care about them when we get emotionally invested in a book or a movie or a show. And that's what we want people to do with our brands and our brand stories. We need to define characters to tell effective brand stories. When you're telling your brand stories, put your customers at the center, not your company. Good brands tell stories and great brands tell their customer stories. Our customer stories, they're our stories. They are the protagonist, the hero. We want them to picture themselves in our story. All right, character development is important, but without a plot, you have no story. There would be no drama, no hook if everything was all character development. The plot drives the story forward. It is the story. It's simply the sequence of events that connects the audience and the protagonist to their ultimate goal. A logline is a screenplay summary in 1 or 2 sentences. It's hard, but it's often all that writers and producers get to pitch a script. A good logline sums up the entire plot in just a few words. The objective of a logline is to whet someone's appetite. You're trying to bait them with the mystery. What happened? How does it happen? Just like with our brand stories, you want to sell, not tell. If you tell them too much, they won't have any questions or have any reason to read your script to find out. A logline needs to include the protagonist, their goal, and the antagonist or the antagonistic force. We recently did a case study on one of our partners, Giving Tree Media. The logline for that story is how Matt overcame fear to make over $250,000 annually with Vendasta. You know the protagonist, Matt, the antagonistic force, fear, and Matt's ultimate goal, make money. The plot always contains the main character's goal. What is their driving force? What makes them tick? To look for inspiration on this, consider your customer's North Star. What are they ultimately trying to achieve? In our story example, Matt's main goal beyond making money was to quit his other jobs and make a healthy living off his media company alone. And no story is complete without conflict. The conflict is what drives the story. It's what creates tension and builds suspense, which is the key elements that make a story interesting. If there's no conflict, not only will the audience not care, but there won't be a compelling story to tell. When Superman first came out, there was no kryptonite. He was indestructible, had no vulnerabilities. He could not lose. That wasn't compelling. Audiences stopped watching. There needs to be a potential for loss, a challenge to overcome. People don't love you or your brand in spite of your vulnerabilities. They love you because of them. The brand storytelling parallel of conflict is the problem that you solve for your customers. This is related to your why and is likely the reason that your company started in the first place. If you're a little further removed from that now, think of what you're trying to get your customers to do, and that will likely bring you closer to the answer. Google solves the problem of bad, irrelevant search results. Before Tinder, meeting people generally only happened on weekends, not 7 days a week, and Nike set out to solve the problem of ill-fitting shoes. And then there's the theme. The theme of a story is what the author is trying to convey, the central idea of the story. It's what the story is really about. A theme is the film's central unifying concept. It evokes a universal human experience and can be stated in 1 or 2 words or even a short phrase, like love, death, or coming of age. The main theme of Titanic? Love. Star Wars? Good versus evil. And Rocky? Perseverance. One of the main themes in the Giving Tree media story is resilience. While each story is unique, almost every one of them falls into the traditional story arc that we as humans intuitively understand, create, and emote. Most stories start with a setup, some escalating action leads to a conflict, and then a resolution, and then finally a conclusion. When you recognize the formula, it's easier to create stories. The brand parallel is really similar to a traditional story arc. The 4 elements of successful brand stories are hook, problem, solution, and then call to action. Each web page, case study, piece of content, social post, every channel you use needs to communicate a compelling brand story. Your stories are incredibly valuable. Your stories will move people. They will bring you customers and brand loyalists, and they will help people within your organization feel like they're driving toward a common goal. They will make everyone in your circle of influence care. I'm Yours in Story, Nakia Behill.